All right, guys, well, we're going to get started tonight. My name is Laura Hopkins, and tonight I'm going to be going through a book called The Chemistry of Essential Oils. Don't be intimidated by all my sticky notes, but this book, don't be intimidated by the size. The author of this book, Dr. David Stewart, he has since passed away, but he was a family friend, and I had the pleasure of learning from him many times over the years, sitting and listening to him speak and teach. And I've heard him teach more than once on the chemistry of essential oils, and I still learn every time. One of the things that Dr. Stewart did, even though this book is really thick and can be intimidating to people, one thing that Dr. Stewart did was he always kind of made everybody feel at ease. He was born into science. He goes into that in the beginning, that he was born to a scientist. His dad, he followed eventually he followed in his dad's footsteps. As a child, he's got some great stories at the beginning of how he grew up and what led him on this path. And one of the things that I really love, he tells a story of when he was a child, and he made a bomb, and he didn't get to see it go off because his parents discovered it, and they got to enjoy that experience, the shocking surprise. But he tells a lot of great stories in this book, and it's now that he's gone on, I read the book and I get a little choked up because I hear his voice. I hear him sharing the stories. And there's somebody on the call tonight who I'm going to invite to talk at any time. I didn't know she's going to be on, but Yvonne McDonald is on with us, and she probably feels the same way. She's got to spend many hours with Dr. Stewart, and I'm sure as she goes every time, there's probably lots of things that remind you of him. And she's carried on his legacy in many ways by teaching care, from teaching Raindrop and chemistry of essential oils and VitaFlex and emotional release. So I just want to welcome Yvonne at any point in time. Tonight really is about a book review and how to use this book, but I know everybody would love to hear your stories. And just like we tell Gary Young stories, I think it's important to tell Dr. David Stewart's stories, because he was a pioneer. And but you're not allowed to make anybody cry. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. You can't probably do it without getting a little choked up. But okay, so tonight, what we're going to do is I'm going to break this down for people who have this book and it just sits on your shelf. Because I think unless you're teaching chemistry or you just have a love or desire to learn about it, you might not reach for it. So I'm the type of person that science was never something that just enthralled me. And I didn't have a desire to just learn about science on my own, of course, until I became an adult and I was having to teach homeschooling, or not having to, I chose to homeschool, and then I was teaching science. And so then I got excited about it and science experiments. And isn't that how it is? And something that you love or something you want to learn, you have more interest in it. So as we go through the book tonight, I think one of the highlights of this book, if you have it with you, you can pull it out. And I'm going to just take you through I'm going to point out some really important things that I think are important, at least. And one of the most important things to me is this table of contents is amazing. He doesn't just break it down by chapter. It is broken down into the subsections, and every chapter has the key points of every chapter. So if you are kind of struggling to understand, or you want it just a high level, you can go to the end of the chapter and read the summary. It's like he put a cliff notes. He knows people. It's like he was a teacher or something. It's like he understood us. He went in and he put the keynotes of every chapter at the end of the chapter. And I think that's pretty awesome. So as you go through it, the first part is really an introduction. It's kind of who he is and why you should trust him. He tells of his background and all of his education, his personal life. And then it gives an introduction to him also as a man of God. And a lot of people, if you didn't know, I mean, everyone thinks of Dr. Stewart as being one of our science guys, but Dr. Stewart was also, besides having degrees in physics and mathematics, he also has a degree in theology. He was an ordained Methodist minister. He started his career with an intention of going into the ministry, stopped in seminary, and then he actually later became, after he went towards science and geological studies and got his PhD, he actually went back and became ordained. So he definitely is a man who can talk to you 100% in this book, speak to you through this book about chemistry, but he also says that a good science always points us to a creator. And that was very crucial with him and his wife Lee as they talked in CARE, the Center for Aromatherapy Research and Education, and it was very much what they called non-secular, and so that means they did point to a creator and to order. So as we go through this book tonight, I'm going to just point on a couple of main things that I think is really important for you as you are looking for ways to use your book. Why chemistry? He put a section in here on chemistry, and he said, my answer is this: you don't have to know chemistry to use essential oils successfully. No, yeah. Many of you have no clue and really probably won't dive headfirst into this book, but you can gain a little understanding of how and why essential oils work. You can apply them and use them better and more effectively. And since your belief has something to do with how well oils perform, he'll get into that later, perhaps a little science will strengthen the level of your faith, which is another benefit you might gain from a chemistry seminar or a book such like this. And if you want to teach others how to use oils, they will ask you questions, and many of the questions can be answered only if you know some chemistry. You will also encounter professionals with a technical or medical background who want to know if there's any science to the practice of aromatherapy. To respond satisfactorily to such sincere inquiries, you need to know a little appropriate chemistry, or at least have a familiarity with the resources to which you can direct them for their answers. And for most of you, it's going to be you have a resource and you'll know how to use it to direct them for their answers. Even if it just means that you give them the link to buy this book on Amazon. This is a great resource for every essential oil user. All right, so as we dive into this book, one of the in the review of chemistry literature, he really talks about, some of you get questions all the time about the safety of essential oils, the validity of essential oils, and especially pharmaceuticals versus essential oils and things that really seem to be tricky. So he gives a lot of sites and studies. He puts studies in here that kind of can help break that down for you. And one of my favorite ones is on page 43, and it's talking about wintergreen and methylate or methyl salicylate. There we go. Thank you, Laura. Laura talking, take two. And so as you're going through and you're understanding parts of this book, it's okay to go back and reread it. I do that a lot. In fact, I have never sat down and read it cover to cover, but I enjoy going back and pulling out pieces, because I feel like if I read it in small chunks and kind of meditate on that, it kind of helps me to learn and absorb it. So that could be a really important process for you as well, because this book is massive. It's pretty big, but you can break it down into those little pieces. So what about essential oils and fatty oils? Did any of you, first, when you were introduced to essential oils, people, my mother-in-law talks about this. She goes, what, you mean like canola oil? She didn't understand what that meant, because, when I grew up, when my experience with oil was you cooked with it or you anointed with it. And so, and I was not anointing with the right kind of oil. We used fatty oils. We used olive oil. We didn't ever use Crisco, but for really tough situations, I could see my mama slathering that on me. But one of the things that we have to understand is the difference between essential oils and fatty oils, right? Because we talk about both of them when we talk about diluting. So he gives a good breakdown on page 55 about the difference between the two. What is a fatty oil and fatty acid? Those terms can be used interchangeably in his book. But he gives the 11 differences. So with essential oils, they're distilled from plants. With fatty oils, they're pressed from seeds. With essential oils, they're tiny molecules. With fatty oils, they're large molecules. there's additional other things here that kind of set them apart. With essential oils, they circulate throughout plants and in human bodies, but fatty oils do not circulate in plants or in human bodies. Essential oils can pass through tissues, cell walls, and cell membranes. Fatty oils do not pass through tissues, cell walls, and cell membranes. The only change in that, and Yvonne, correct me if I'm wrong, is whenever then essential oil can bond or can carry a fatty oil with it down to additional layers. So if a fatty oil and an essential oil are used together, the essential oil can transmit or carry things with it to different layers of the skin, correct?
That's correct. One of the other things the fatty oil does is slow down the descent of the oil. You know, we're going through an essential oil that we determine being hot is just a very small molecule oil, and it's just going through the skin just so fast. And the fatty oil will actually slow down the descent of that oil to keep it from feeling hot. But yes, the fatty both descend all the way through the tissues.
And what's interesting about when she says that, if you kind of get a visual, and I remember Dr. Stewart talking about when we say an oil is hot, it just means there's friction on the surface. And so what that essential oil is doing, it's moving quickly through the layers of the skin, and it can create friction, whereas the fatty oil slows it down. And so what you're feeling in that heat, what you feel is friction. And so very scientifically, you can explain to someone, that what we use dilution in situations where there's too much friction and slowing down that rate of descent into the skin. Okay, so of course, essential oils are not greasy to the touch, where fatty oils are. Essential oils do not spoil or turn rancid, where fatty oils can spoil and turn rancid. And he has some other things here that I can't repeat if we want to record this and play it later, but you can look on page 55 and see all of the differences between the essential oils and the fatty oils. So chapter 3 is all about chemistry, basic chemistry made easier. I love it. It's chemistry made simple. Now, okay, we're going to keep getting easier. He just keeps breaking it down, and he really does. He just keeps taking you down. He doesn't start you off with sesquiterpenes right from the beginning. He lets you get there, and that's a good thing to do it. He tells you this is specifically what chemistry is. For those who are needing a little bit more understanding, when we talk about the atomic weight of a molecule, this is really important. And when the distillation process, we covered the basic chemistry. The atomic weight of an element is stated in AMU, or atomic mass units. And this is important from a distillation process, because when people talk about, what are in essential oils, whenever we talk about in Young Living, we may not grow everything, but we distill everything. Distillation is very important to us, because we want to make sure that the proper temperatures, the proper amount of, when I say temperature, steam, the temperature of the steam, and the pressure that is applied in the distillation process is maximizing what we want to get out of that plant. And the atomic mass unit of molecules of essential oils are very lightweight. They float to the top of the chamber, and then they go out of the chamber through what we call the condenser. And the condenser starts to cool it down, and then it goes down to the bottom of what we call a separator, where the oil and water, because if you're putting steam into the process, the steam, as it cools down, turns back into water. And so what's interesting about that is we know the atomic mass units of proteins, of peptides, of things that are found in plants that are heavier, don't distill like the essential oil. So you can, you take a sprig of lavender, it's going to have allergens, and it's going to have things that the peptides, the proteins, that you just stick that in a bottle, or you stick that even in olive oil or something, and you rub that on your skin. That's going to have the that's not just the oil, it's the actual plant. It's all of the things that make up the plant, all of the molecules. But whenever you distill the plant, you actually are, the plant releases the molecules of the oil, and they are then distilled out. Whereas when the process is over, the plant material, the heavier molecules stay in the distillery, stay in that cooker, where the essential oils have been taken out through the condenser and rest at the bottom on the separator. So your oil and your water will separate, and the oil will rise to the top.
Laura, may I say something here?
Please do, please.
One of the things that I would like to stress here when we talk about the essential oils and the scientific distillation, the difference in the Young Living in our product than other companies, we know that proteins, antigens weigh at least 500 AMU. So we are not going to take our temperature and our pressure high enough that it would distill proteins and antigens out. But what about those companies that don't have that scientific background? All they're doing is just a steaming. They're doing high pressures, they're doing high temperatures, and they are distilling larger molecules, which could be those proteins and antigens. So that's what sets Young Living apart from the other companies.
And they might get a higher yield because of that, right, Yvonne? They're going to get a higher yield because they're going to get more out of the plant material that they can turn around. And that's why do they do that? It's they're doing it because it's in most situations, it's just because of it's an economic reason. You want to get everything you can out of that plant. But what the distillers of the world, who are artisans at it, from France, where Gary Young learned, they knew that there were reasons why you did at certain temperatures and and this is exactly why. There's a science behind it, and it's the atomic mass unit of those molecules. So thank you for sharing that. That's really important. All right, next, moving on to chapter 4, the chosen ones, and we spell chosen without an E. And the reason why is because he goes through the periodic table of elements and breaks it down to just really the 5 top elements that would be chosen: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, sulfur, and nitrogen, CHOSN. And that's the reason why is because all 5 play roles in essential oils. Some are major and some are minor. And he does further break it down to just 3, and that's carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, with sulfur and nitrogen playing the minor roles. But this is really important in understanding what our oils are made of, and then how our bodies are composed too. And whenever you see why, if we have we've been intelligently, not if, because we have been intelligently designed, the plants were intelligently designed first, and then we were placed in the middle of that garden. And Dr. Stewart talks about that in his Simple Chemistry. All right. In this one, he also talks about fragrance, just some of the properties of oils. May not be due to its main ingredients, but due to its trace compounds. And you will find that to be true in one of the examples that I give tonight, of an oil that a lot of people love and it's out of stock. All right, so you continue to go through, then you get chapter 5 is your organic chemistry made easy. I love it. I love that he just continues to say it's easy, because it's part of his life, and he knew it all through his life, so he grew up with it. But one of the, when you look at the word organic, we think, different terms. It's a much more popular term today. Organic means, it's basically from the Latin to mean to organize, organum. And even talking about the organic chemistry, when we're considering essential oils, we have to be careful about, because a lot of oils are synthesized. And so just like Yvonne was talking about, there's plants that are distilled that are of that aren't distilled properly with temperature and with pressure. But whenever we're talking about synthesized oils, that's a whole nother ballgame, because they might have the similar molecules. They might look the same when you write out their chemical makeup on paper, but what does it look like in a laboratory when you start to, when there's just a little bit off? Whenever you start looking at, and I want to give some examples here, I can't show all of the, um, he takes you through some of the shorthand in chapter 5 and chapter 6 when he starts talking about rings. But when we're talking about the way that um, atoms are connected and the way, Yvonne, I'm going to probably have to ask you to help me. I'm losing my train of thought here. How they're grouped and how you can see, for example, companies would take, they can't patent coumarin, right? So they take the molecules of that and then they change it around a little bit, and then they have something completely different. Would you like to expound on that if you know what I'm talking about?
I do, and it's only one molecule that they change. That molecule has to be in a cousin in the same line on the periodic table, but you can substitute sodium and I forget what the other one is. And it's the only molecule they're changing. The whole formula is identical except for one molecule, and that molecule is called a cousin. It's going to be in the same line on that periodic table. So cousins can fit into the same receptor sites in your body. This is, I know you may get into this later, but this is where we get into fluoride and iodine. There are cousins in that same chart. So when you're drinking fluorinated water, then your receptor sites are filled up with fluoride or fluorine, and you're not, or chlorinated, either one, you're not having receptor sites left over for iodine. So it's just where they just take one molecule and change it, and then they can patent it. The other thing to touch on there is the fact that all essential oils are made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Very few are made up with the nitrogen and the other molecules, but the carbon can be made in a lab. It can be synthetic, and it can be called all natural, even though it's made in the lab. And they can use that in their essential oils instead of the natural carbon.
And I bet nothing ever goes out of stock when you can make carbon in a laboratory.
That's right. That's right. When you can produce them in a laboratory, you don't have to wait for the plant to grow.
You don't have to wait for the plant to grow, and you don't have to wait for the distillation process. You don't have to wait for it to go through 8 different scientific tests. So yeah, that would be a lot easier, wouldn't it? But then our receptor sites don't recognize it. And what happens whenever it's synthetic? Our body doesn't recognize it, and then we have side effects. Then we have alternatives because our body's going, wait a minute, it's throwing me off here. So, and no, I hadn't planned on getting into that, but thank you for sharing that, because I want to make sure this was supposed to be just a highlight of how to use the book. And I start getting into it and I get excited talking about it. And I'm not, again, never really had an interest in chemistry, but because of Dr. David Stewart, I do. So let's jump ahead. We're going to get to page 507. And this is really what a lot of you are kind of most interested in. And that is the summary of compounds. And as we go through this, you can start looking at all the charts now. It breaks it down. So if you need to know a word, and you're looking at a word and you see, for example, an alkane, it's anything ending with A-N-E. Terpenes, that includes your monoterpenes, your sesquiterpenes, your diterpenes, your triterpenes, they end in E-N-E. Phenols should end in O-L, but they don't always. Alcohols are going to end in OL. So this kind of takes you through and kind of you start understanding the code of some of these compounds. And then you have your different tables that he put in here to kind of help you understand exactly what they're going through. On page 509, the Greek letters and compound prefixes as you're studying, this is a good place to go back to, understanding what he has there. And I wanted to take us through one oil that a lot of people would love to have back, but because of sustainability and because it's just not available anymore, and that's spikenard. And so I'm going to take you through tonight. We're going to look up spikenard. We're going to talk just some basics about the compounds. And even if you haven't read the book, you can use it as a resource. It's harder if you haven't read it or don't understand the chemistry, but you can still peck your way through the back part of the book to find an alternative. And then what it might do is actually kind of light a fire under you to read more and understand more. So let's start with spikenard. So if you go to page 540, we're going to read about spikenard. It's the chemical analysis of it. And you'll see the name there at the top. Spikenard's botanical name is as Nardostocus jatamonsi, and it is in the Valerianaceae family, the valerian family. And that Valerianaceae is going to be a small family. There aren't a lot of other oils in it. For example, if you were to go to, let's say, the peppermint and lavender, that's the Lamaceae family. And there are a lot of plants in there. Like, do you know basil and peppermint and lavender are all cousins? Yeah, they're in the Lamaceae family. But the Valerianaceae family, what do you hear in that word? What oil do you hear in Valerianaceae family? I think people are mouthing it. Valerian, right. So the first time I was thinking spikenard, I thought, okay, let's look it up and see a little bit about it botanically. Let's look at some chemistry here. And if you look at it, it has other names. It has nard, jatamonsi, Indian valerian. Okay, so what we can do here, we know nard, it was mentioned, if you have a King James version of the Holy Bible, when spikenard is mentioned in anointing Jesus Christ, it is called nard in the King James. In New King James, it's called spikenard. So there's a connection there. Indian valerian is a different plant, but it is, it's just a different name for it. But let's look over then at valerian, which is on page 556. And you can see that both, if you compare the two, so they're fortunately both on the left side of the page, and you can kind of fold your page over like I'm doing like this and just kind of compare them, apple right there. And you have Valeriana officinalis is also, of course, in the Valerianaceae family. It's also known as garden heliotrope and heliotrope. Both are distilled from the roots. Pretty cool. All right, so as you go down here, though, you're looking at comparing the chemistry. They both have sesquiterpenols and sesquiterpenes. And within that family, you're going to see that they have, in the spikenard does not have the verilazulane, which would be an alkaline, or a, nope, it would be a aldehyde, right? I took my card out where I had my trace. So you're going to see some similar things, but you're going to see very different. One thing that is obvious from the beginning, they both have monoterpenes, pretty similar lines there, but valerian has 34% to 50% esters, whereas spikenard is predominantly sesquiterpenes. It is as a high percentage of sesquiterpenes, a high percentage of monoterpenes. So right there, we just kind of go, okay, the sesquiterpene count in valerian is not high enough to be real comparable chemically to spikenard. However, they're in the same family. And if you compare some of their constituents, if you compare it in some of the references that we talked about last week, they might have some similarities. But they really are chemically very different. So even though they're in the same family, they're very chemically different. Anybody else in the same family with somebody but chemically different? All right, you know what I'm talking about then. All right, so then let's look at the next thing I do whenever you're looking at the models is you go, okay, well, what else is high in sesquiterpenes and monoterpenes? So what you do is you go to your chart that is on page And by the way, in the Valerianaceae family, those are really the only two essential oils that we have that would be considered in the Valerianaceae family. Okay. There are other plants, but not essential oils that we use. So then we go to the classes of compounds that starts on page 550 or 563. And as we work our way through it, we see the different, there's esters, there's alcohol, there's monoterpene, there's phenols. And then on page 572, you're going to see sesquiterpene. So you see at 36 to 50%. So if you see on that chart there, it tells you there's a range and there's only 3 oils that fall within that range. It lists spikenard as 52%. So you could go up to black pepper, which is 53%. But somewhere in that range there, you're going to have from 36 to 52, you're going to have yarrow. Now this has cannabinoid. It actually has Cannabis stavia listed here, but it calls it marijuana. We'll talk about that in just a second. And then ylang ylang. Okay, so those are the 3. Chemically, if you wanted then to go over to the monoterpenes, so go back a couple of pages to page 569. And what you're looking at is a range between 27 and 45. So within 27 to 45, there are about 15 oils. None of them, if you want to, you can look and see if your yarrow, marijuana, and ylang ylang are on there. Well, let's call it Cannabis stavia. How's that sound? And that they're not. So you don't see the oils that are high in monoterpene or in sesquiterpenes in that same range transferring over to the oils that are high in monoterpenes as well. So we're talking large quantities like spikenard does. So do you understand how I'm kind of making this comparison here? You see the back and forth. But what you can do is you can go, okay, let's look at oils that are higher than in that percentage. And let's look at oils that are just on that same chart. And then you start to break it down from there and looking at those. So you look at, there was a couple. Lavender is on both lists, but it's not high on either one. You do see that the Cannabis stavia is on that. You do see that, of course, valerian and spikenard are right there together. You see black pepper is on there as well. Black pepper has higher content of monoterpene than spikenard, but it also has a higher content of sesquiterpenes. So there you go. There's some comparable oils when it comes to the highest components. But again, when we go back to what are the things that make it valerian, make it spikenard, that's not going to necessarily be the highest compounds. Sometimes it's those trace compounds. So when we start looking at that, then that's when it takes you back to the valerian oil, some of those trace compounds that you would find in it that make it in the Valerianaceae family. And I think the other part of it is when we look at the Cannabis stavia that's listed here, it has a lot of similar characteristics. When you step back from it and go, okay, chemically, Dr. Stewart would say, chemically, I can tell you what an oil can do. I can break it down in chemistry. I can tell you the components. I can tell you what an oil will do looking at their components on a piece of paper. But he talks also in the back of this book about beyond the chemistry. He talks about the consciousness of creation, and he talks about what we call physics. Chemistry will tell you what an oil do, but when we talk about physics, we talk about what do you want the oil to do. So you can get as close as you can. There's not a substitute for spikenard. It's not like we have eucalyptus in 5 varieties and you can just pick from one. We only have one spikenard, and that's why I believe it was so special and precious in biblical times. And so, as you can see, what I'm trying to walk you through tonight is you do the best you can with what you have and understand the chemistry, but you also can believe and pray and ask in faith. And that's why what Dr. Stewart always encouraged us to do is let the science lead you, but also let your faith lead you. And so using the options of using wisdom that God has given you to just step into that. And also just continuing to use the oils and apply your faith with it, praying and anointing. That's why it's so powerful. All right, so I've broken this down. I do think just across the board, if you do not have a spikenard and you want to use an oil, I think for me personally, having CBD, the CBD option with some valerian is lovely, and maybe experimenting also with black pepper. Those 3 are lovely, and maybe seeing what even a blend of that, what that does for you. Black pepper, you don't need very much. Again, we always look at those trace compounds, and I feel like with the CBD, we didn't have access to a high quality CBD, and really what we have is a CBD isolate. And so it's not even the when we talk about cannabis stevia, what we have is a smart spectrum and a smart spectrum CBD. So it's an isolate that's added with essential oils, so they're already added in. So be aware of that too as you're using your CBD oil with your other options. See which, peppermint has monoterpenes and sesquiterpenes. And let's see here. Well, no, it doesn't. I spoke too soon. I believe that's monoterpenes, but not sesquiterpenes. Is that, or high counts of sesquiterpenes? So, yeah, that's for sure. And so using CBD with maybe valerian could be an option if you're trying to see of a substitute for spikenard. But don't lose heart if there's an oil that you really, really love and it's out of stock. You can find alternatives, and it's using this book is a great way to do that. I also highly recommend you checking out the table of contents. It's a huge resource. Using the table of contents to kind of get you where you need to go on a topic is pretty helpful. And then also using the index to break things down and help you find. I went through actually and looked up every reference to spikenard in here before the class, and I looked up every reference to valerian, and I looked up every reference to Cannabis stevia to just kind of draw some correlations. So that is what I would recommend you do, and understand that don't just let this book sit on your shelf and collect dust to be able to use it effectively. Yvonne, is there anything that you'd like to add to that?
No, I think you did a great job.
Well, stick around for questions because they probably are going to stump me. You're the expert. Yvonne teaches the chemistry of essential oils. And if you're interested in learning what she learned firsthand from Dr. David Stewart, she teaches this in her home in Omaha, Texas, Naples. No, Omaha. I'm sorry, Omaha. And you can go and go to a care weekend, a care intensive. And if you've never taken raindrop courses, it's a great investment in yourself and also in your business if you are using essential oils to help and helping others. All right, did anyone have questions as we kind of wrap things up tonight? We had a good active class. I see people taking notes. Surely there's a question or two.
I do have a question.
Yes.
So looking through spikenard on 540, I noticed at the bottom of the sesquiterpenes, it said patchouli. So then I went over and I looked up patchouli, and it looks like it has really high sesquiterpenes. So my curiosity is, if you find something that has, even if it's a small constituent, does that mean it will marry better to it? If you're trying to make a blend, like if you wanted to put valerian and patchouli together to try to come close to what spikenard was?
Right. And what I think the important thing, what he said is sometimes it's not the similar compounds, but the trace compounds. So that patchouli is an alcohol, but it is a sesquiterpenol. And so it's a little different than a sesquiterpenes. It's not a terpene, it's an alcohol. And so
Okay.
it's a little different. So that but it is more of a trace amount that makes it unique. So that could be, a patchouli, you'd have to compare it a little bit more. There's that nardol. Do you see that there? That's an alcohol. So finding an alcohol, another oil that would have that. I'm gonna keep turning the pages here as I'm looking, because you can go then on the compounds, page 593 has all your compounds listed alphabetically. And so you go through that, and then you see if it's even listed there. Some of them, so myrtle has, nope. Spikenard's the only one that has nardol as a sesquiterpenol. So looking there, you could go through and maybe seeing those trace amounts, like that patchouli is an alcohol. And so that if you look on page 606, you're going to see patchouli listed there. That's the sesquiterpenol. So that could be making your own spikenard blend. It's not going to be spikenard, but getting some of those constituents all together would be really lovely.
Well,
Yeah.
the alls, the sesquiterpenols, and the ketones, both of those classes are detoxifying. Those are the ones we use for cleansing off receptor sites. Any alcohols, any ketones, or any phenols. So that one the spikenard does not actually have, well, it does have a phenolic aldehyde at 1 to 2%, but they're using the ketones and the sesquiterpenols for the cleansing part, for the detoxifying part in the spikenard.
Very cool. And if you look at the sesquiterpenol, the ketones, and that phenolic aldehyde that she's talking about, all of them have a little valerianol. They have a component of that valerianol. So there's a key thing there, and that's where your valerian comes in. It's very similar to valerian in that regard. So again, it might not look, you've got esters in valerian, you've got things that are not in spikenard, but there are some of those trace compounds, the things that are the smaller, that make them really more connected as a plant, if that makes sense. Maybe one day we'll have more spikenard again. That's my real prayer, is that spikenard production is able to increase. And wouldn't that be awesome to have spikenard in high quantities? Anybody else have a question? Thank you for that question, Tracy, and for your excellent answer, Yvonne. If people are interested in care, Yvonne, what's the best way to reach you or to see what your calendar is?
Best way to reach me is probably through the Care Empowered page. It's an open page. You can message me through that, or they can always text me, 903-563-4903.
When I have this replay, I'll edit that part out since it's going to go to the world.
Well, I don't care if the world knows. You might get some new people from the world.
We're gonna put this out there, but not your cell phone number. That was just for the people who joined us live. The rest can go through Care Empowered. Is it empower or empowered?
Empowered. Care Empowered with an ED.
Okay, I typed it in the chat box for everyone to see. Any other questions?
And it's a page, not a group.
What do you guys think? Is it not as scary as you thought it would be? How many have the book and really have never cracked it open before?
Oh, I have mine and I have tabs all over it. Yvonne can attest.
I've scrolled through it a couple of times.
Chocolate cake, right, Yvonne?
Oh, yeah. Love it. Love it.
Deborah gave us a thumbs up. Do you have a question or are you just saying yes?
I was saying I have the book and I've never opened it.
Okay, well, hopefully this was helpful tonight.
It was interesting. Scary, but interesting.
Well, if it's scary, just start reading the first part about his life and you'll start to hear his voice come through the pages. And he is, it's actually kind of fun to listen to him, just kind of tell a little bit about it. Read it in small doses. If it's scary, actually read the very first part and then go to the very end, the Beyond Chemistry. And he's got some super cool stories back there. Those are some of my favorite. The quantum physics stories are my favorite. So, and I will leave you guys with this tonight. That again, chemistry is great. It's fun. It's exciting, even for people who typically wouldn't enjoy chemistry. When you start talking about why oils work, it's exciting. So when we talk about the purpose of the oils and the chemistry in our bodies and the chemistry of the oils, it makes sense and it helps us explain it better to other people. And so we do that. And then, but then we also have just the understanding that there is a creator and that he has allowed us to have free choice, free will, and that when we align with him and his will, and we use what he's given us, there's pretty amazing things that can come to pass. We see things happen that we wouldn't see just using an oil or just praying. When we bring those two together, it's very, very powerful. So hope that's an encouragement. And we have this best book series has been a lot of fun. Next week, we're going to have Joy Ballard sharing on gentle babies. And it's not just gentle babies. So if you are past the baby phase, that's okay. She's going to talk about empowering moms. And she is not just a mom of 5, but she's also an RN who worked in labor and delivery. So she's going to walk us through just some basics and some empowering things to help mothers. And if you know young moms or expecting moms, it'll be a good class for them.
Is that next Friday also?
That'll be next Thursday.
Thursday.
Thursday night.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Joanna, did you have something? Did I see your hand? Okay.
I just wanted to chime in and say that my Chemistry of Essential Oils book has been really helpful for when I'm having conversations with people around the dinner table, and they're kind of thinking that maybe this is all intangible, woo-woo, whatever. And then I get out my chemistry book and I'm familiar enough with it. But I can just hand it to them and be like, no, this is the real deal. I mean, there's solid science behind this. I'm not making anything up. And so I forever am grateful that Dr. Stewart put together this book. And I think learning from it also helps me to I don't have to be a brilliant chemist because it's a brilliant resource.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. On your bookshelf.
I use it.
It's a great,
a lot of classes from it.
Would you say again, the title of next week is going to be Gentle Babies, but Joy's going to be talking about
We're going to go through the Gentle
empowering women,
Babies.
empowering mothers.
Yes. And so talking about birth choice and talking about, we know that a lot of moms and a lot of us have, we have hospital deliveries, we have home births, and everything in between, birth centers, all the other things. So she comes at it from a perspective of someone who's not just given birth, but has walked through it from a very medical place. She was an RN, and just to kind of talk moms through some empowerment on their birth choices, no matter what they choose, to ask questions. And she continues to, as many of us do, walk through the benefits or the consequences of some of our medical decisions earlier in life. And so she just wants to help anybody that she can with her story. So
Okay. I have a friend. I wanted to make sure that she's on 7 Only Days. I'm pretty sure. And she is an RN, a labor and delivery RN, and mother of one anyway. So I wanted to make sure I was giving her enough information. Thank
Sure.
you.
No, you're so welcome. Hope she can make it. So
I
we'll
will
have that. And then we have, because of spring break, we've got our little bit of a schedule change, but we're going to be doing, finishing out March every Thursday night. And then in April, we're starting the Ultimate Balance book. We did this almost 2 years ago, but some people weren't ready for prime time. And so we're trying it again. It's very interesting. It really talks more about energy and working on your body system. So if you don't have a good body system understanding, I can lead you to some resources to kind of get some basics on that. But we're going to walk through the Ultimate Balance book again, and it's going to be a good one in April. So mark your calendars for Thursday nights in April. That's going to be our next book study. We did an earlier book study in January and February on the emotional intelligence. And then we're going to be picking up Ultimate Balance starting in April. So any other questions? Well, thank you for your time tonight. I hope this has been valuable. I really enjoyed it. And we will see you next week for Gentle Babies. Good night.
Good night.